Hi students, from the preceding lessons I hope by and large the name SQL is not new to you now. SQL is the name of a computer language which expands to structured query language. You also know that this language is used to perform all sorts of operations on the data stored in relational database management systems. But still there are some aspects of SQL you need to know from the job interview point of view and also as you start using it. As Dr. E.F. Codd formulated the concept of relational model for large databases, in the theory, he had proposed to have a simple statement form of language resembling close to English to be used in such database systems. For example, get all such names of students from students table who have scored marks 80 and above. So that is the English version of the statement, which translates into SQL. Very simple. Select names from students where marks greater than equals to 80 and it ends with a semicolon. So you can see that SQL is an extremely simple language which resembles English language very much, and Dr. E.F. Codd actually wanted to have this language in this same fashion, and he called that language as SQL, Structured Query Language. Remember that the SQL form of that statement that we have seen earlier remains uniformly same in almost all the databases like Oracle, SQL Server, PostgreSQL, SQLite, DB2 and many others including MySQL also. For all of them are relational database management systems because it is ANSI standard, that is standardized by American National Standard Institute. SQL language was developed by Donald Chamberlin and Raymond Boyce in 1970. When Codd formulated the concept of RDBMS, it was standardized by ANSI in 1986. The earlier name of the language as it was introduced for the first time was actually SQL, S-E-Q-U-E-L, SQL. Many people still know it by the same name, SQL, and pronounce it like SQL only. But in the early days, there were some litigations, the legal problems faced in naming this language as SQL, and so later on this SQL was changed to SQL. By the way, SQL expands to Structured English Query Language. SQL language has its origin in relational algebra and tuple relational calculus. SQL is actually the implementation of tuple relational calculus, which is a highly mathematical branch. We are avoiding the mathematical explanation of anything over here, and it is not required also. The tuple relational calculus is non-procedural representation of relational algebra as applied to rows stored in normalized tables, or simply called as relations. We have seen what relations are. Relations are simply the normalized tables, means those tables which represent only one particular type of entity. As such, SQL is called as declarative language, which means that it is result oriented. So you only need to tell the system what you want in the result, but not how to go about producing the result. The main advantage of declarative language is that it is independent of structure of data and its storage. SQL statements actually come in many forms. So here is the classification of the SQL statements. DQL, which expands to data query language. Then DML, data manipulation language, which helps us to perform the operations like insert, update and delete. Then TCL, transaction control language, where we are supposed to either save the change, the command is commit, or discard the change, the command is rollback. DDL, that is data definition language, we are required to create various objects to hold the data and maybe to write the procedures, functions, etc. So all that comes under the DDL. Then DCL, that is data control language, which is used for implementing the security by creating roles and privileges you are supposed to assign to the users so that they can perform their task only limited to their context. And last but not the least, the admin statements. We are going to study most of these statements over here. The first commercial use of SQL was made by Relational Software Inc, now known as Oracle Corporation, in their Oracle version 2 V2 on a wax machine. Now SQL itself is a non-procedural and declarative statement kind of language, as we have seen, but it may have programmable extensions at times in which SQL statements can be directly embedded into a programmable block of language for better efficiency or for data security and to push processing of the data preferably towards the server side rather than fetching the data to the client side and performing all the processing over there. So these languages, which are programmable extensions to the SQL in different databases, have been mentioned over here. So you can see there TSQL, which is available in Microsoft SQL Server, then PLSQL, which is available in Oracle. SQL PSM is the part of MySQL. SQL PL is part of IBM DB2. TSQL in Sybase, and there are a couple of many more such relational databases which also have the extensions to SQL. The important thing about all these extensions also is that though there is no standardization issued by ANSI in respect of this procedural extension to SQL, but because of the competitive market, these languages also have more or less the same structure. Now we come to the point that why should we learn SQL? SQL is actually now a mandatory skill. Whether you want to become a backend programmer where you will exclusively do the programming on the database side, front-end programmer, because mere proficiency in Java, Python, PHP, .NET and others may not be enough. You need to have SQL skills to use and manipulate the data from the database. Now the managers in decision making capacity at least must have the working knowledge of SQL, because they are required to generate the ad hoc reports before they can do some decision making. Also for aspiring data scientists, data analysts and BI professionals, SQL skills are absolutely mandatory. So also it is mandatory for aspiring database administrators and system admins handling the database servers. Thus friends, I hope you have understood the importance of learning SQL. Now from the next session we shall dip our hands in SQL. To start with, we will see how to set up the stage. So move on. Thanks for watching.